Well, hello dragons, and welcome to this instructional video for Lesson 4 Part 2, Changes in Supply. The main idea behind this economics lesson is factors other than price can affect supply of a product over time, shifting the supply curve to the left or to the right. With that in mind, by the end of watching this video, you will be able to explain what it means for a product's supply to shift, identify factors that might cause a product's supply curve to shift, and describe the difference between a tax and a subsidy. Now that the outcomes for this lesson have been shared with you, let's get started. Like demand curves, supply curves illustrate a product's market at a specific period of time. The supply curve used in the last lesson, for example, is a snapshot of Audio Blast's stereo supply. Again, because the picture is taken at a set point in time, the only factor affecting the quantity of stereo supplied is the one factor shown in the picture, price. Nothing but a change in price is affecting the quantity of stereos supplied by Audio Blast at the time this picture was taken. By examining the supply curve, you can see that price is the only factor affecting the quantity supplied. Look again at the S1 curve. What would have to happen for the number of car stereos supplied to increase from 2,500 to 4,000? The graph shows that only an increase in price from $200 to $500 will cause this change in the quantity supplied. Such an increase in price will result in the intersection of price and quantity supplied, moving from point to point along the supply curve. You already know, however, that markets do not stand still. New snapshots of a product's supply must be taken periodically because supply, like demand, is affected by factors other than price. In economic terms, these determinants of supply, or non-price factors, can shift the entire supply curve of a product instead of simply changing the quantity supplied along the original supply curve. This graph shows movement of the entire S1 supply curve. If the determinants of supply cause an increase in the supply of car stereos, the entire curve shifts to the right. Similarly, if the supply determinants cause a decrease in supply, the entire curve shifts to the left. A shift to either the S2 or S3 curve means that a different quantity of car stereos is supplied at each and every price. What causes these shifts in supply? The determinants of supply include prices of resources, government tools, technology, competition, prices of related goods, and producer expectations. A change in one of these determinants can cause a change in the overall supply for a product. One of the most common determinants that can shift the supply curve is a change in the price of resources, or factors of production. A resource is anything that is used in the production of a good or service. Resources include raw materials, electricity, and workers' wages. These resources contribute to a business's costs of production. Thus, any price change for a resource increases or decreases a business's production costs. When the price of a resource falls, production costs fall accordingly. In turn, lower production costs mean that a business can supply more of the product for the same cost as before. Lower costs also generally go hand in hand with higher profits, which encourage the business to expand supply even more. For these reasons, a decrease in the price of a resource often causes producers to supply more product to the market at each and every price. Suppose that the Fruit Bonanza Company makes fruit juices. The base ingredient of all of their juices is apple juice. An unexpectedly large crop of apples this year has been produced, reducing the price of apples by 10 cents a pound. Given the large amount of apples that Fruit Bonanza buys, this price change significantly reduces the company's production costs. Lower costs allow the company to make more profit on the sale of each bottle of juice at each and every price. The higher profits encourage the owners of Fruit Bonanza to increase production even further. Thus, the supply curve shifts to the right as the company offers more bottles of juice at each and every price. The opposite happens if the cost of a resource increases. If the price of apples rises by 10 cents a pound, for example, Fruit Bonanza's production costs also rise. Higher production costs mean that the company cannot supply as much of the product for the same cost as before. Higher costs also mean lower profits. The prospect of lower profits causes Fruit Bonanza to produce even less juice. Thus, the supply curve shifts to the left as the company offers less juice to the market at each and every price. Various government tools can cause the supply curve for goods and services to shift either to the right or to the left. The three main tools are taxes, subsidies, and regulation. Like individual citizens, producers must pay taxes. A tax is a required payment of money to the government to help fund government services. Businesses may have to pay taxes on the materials they use, the property they own, and the profits they make. Taxes add to a business's production costs, just like the cost of rent or raw materials do. How do taxes affect supply? Higher taxes mean that the businesses are faced with higher costs and the prospect of making less profit, and will supply less of their product to the market. Thus, the supply curve shifts to the left. Payments to private businesses by the government are called subsidies. For example, to ensure consumers an affordable supply of flour, cereal, and other essential wheat products, the government might grant a subsidy to wheat farmers. By lowering the costs of planting wheat compared to the costs of planting a non-subsidized crop, the subsidy continues to encourage Gary Bryant, a wheat farmer, to plant more wheat. The lower costs of planting wheat also promises Gary greater profits on the sale of his wheat. The supply curve for wheat shifts to the right. Subsidies and taxes thus have opposite effects on supply. As you can see from this example, subsidies can reduce a business's production costs. These lower costs mean higher profits, which encourage producers to supply more of their product at each and every price. Keep in mind, however, that subsidies have a cost. Taxpayers fund subsidies given to farmers and other private businesses. To protect the public, the government passes many kinds of regulations, or rules, about how companies conduct business. Regulations are designed to prevent pollution, discrimination, and other problems that affect citizens. Loose government regulations tend to increase supply. Strict regulations, on the other hand, tend to decrease supply. For example, strict pollution controls force companies to spend more money on finding safe ways to dispose of waste and toxic materials. Complying with the regulations thus increases the company's production costs. As you have learned, higher production costs prevent producers from supplying as many goods and services, and the supply curve for their products shifts to the left. New technology, such as a new tool or chemical process, can have a powerful impact on supply by changing the way in which products are made. Usually, new technology makes production more efficient and less expensive. This causes the costs of production to decrease. In turn, producers are able to supply more goods and services at each and every price because their costs are lower and their profits are higher. Consider the case of automobiles. The first cars were produced individually by several workers. Because each car was made up of thousands of parts, production was time-consuming and expensive. In the early 1900s, however, technology revolutionized automobile production. Around 1913, Henry Ford used a new production technique, the assembly line, to make cars in his Detroit area factory. Car frames moved along a conveyor belt past workers who performed their specified tasks in the assembly process. New machines produced the individual automobile parts, which were carried to workers on the assembly line. This new technology had dramatic results. Assembly time was reduced significantly for Ford's Model T automobile. For the same amount of time and money as before, Ford's company could now produce many more Model T automobiles. Therefore, the supply curve for automobiles shifted to the right as it became profitable for producers to offer more cars at each and every price. Keep in mind that technology also has a cost. A company may have to pay researchers or other companies for the desired technology. It is not uncommon for new technology to add to the costs of production at first. Henry Ford had to pay a great deal of money to install the new machines and the assembly line in his factory. However, Ford calculated that the increased efficiency and increased profitability of the new technology would outweigh the initial cost of installation. Competition tends to increase supply, while a lack of competition tends to decrease supply. Why is this so? Consider the market for home video games. When the first company offered these games, the selection was extremely limited. Demand for these games rose quickly, however, generating high sales and good profits for the company. These profits encouraged dozens of new video firms to enter the market. The supply and selection of games soon skyrocketed. As this example shows, a larger number of suppliers in a market tends to increase supply. Each producer competes for a share of the market demand by supplying more of the product. This shifts the entire supply curve to the right as producers offer more goods at each and every price for the product. Remember that suppliers can leave as well as enter a market. If the demand for video games were to fall, there would be more games, more supply, on the market that consumers wanted to purchase. Supply would be higher than demand. Some companies would not sell all of their games and might not make enough profit. These companies might then leave the market. Supply would shrink as fewer producers competed to deliver games to the market. The supply for one good often is connected to the supply for its related goods. This means that changes in a product's price can affect the supply for the product's related goods. For example, think again of Gary Bryant, the wheat farmer. In addition to wheat, Gary has several other choices of crops: corn, soybeans, and hay, for example. These goods are related as far as Gary is concerned because they share a common feature. They are potential crops that he may choose to plant. Gary had planned to plant wheat until the price of wheat dropped suddenly. The price of corn is now higher relative to the price of wheat. Because Gary can earn more profit on corn, he decides to plant corn instead of wheat. Thus, the drop in wheat prices results in an increase in the supply of its related good, corn, even though the price of corn did not change. The supply curve for corn shifts to the right. Likewise, if the price of wheat were to rise relative to corn, most farmers would choose to plant wheat instead of corn in order to earn more profit. The rise in the price of wheat would result in a decrease in the supply of corn. The corn supply curve then would shift to the left. Just as consumers sometimes make current buying decisions based on their expectations of future income, suppliers make current production decisions based on their expected future profit. Producers' income, of course, depends on the prices that they can charge for their products. The expectations they have of future changes in the price of their products can affect how much of their product they supply to the market now. For example, suppose that Sports Madness, a sports equipment manufacturer, expects the price of its basketballs to increase in the next few months. The company believes that the start of the school year, and later the basketball season, will increase demand and prices. it decides to increase production of its basketballs now in order to meet the expected increase in demand. Thus, the supply curve for basketballs shifts to the right. The effect of expectations on supply are difficult to predict, however. In the same situation, another sports manufacturer might decide to withhold a large portion of its basketballs by storing them in a warehouse. The company plans to deliver these basketballs to the market in a couple of months when prices will be higher. This decision leads to a decrease in the current supply of basketballs and shifts the supply curve in the opposite direction, to the left. Manufacturers face similar options when they expect the price of their products to fall in the future. For example, if the above companies expect the price of basketballs to fall when the season ends, they may increase their production now in order to sell as many basketballs as possible before the price falls. Their expectations of future prices causes the supply curve to shift to the right. On the other hand, they may decrease their immediate production, anticipating that demand and prices will be lower. This decrease would shift the supply curve to the left. So that's the way it is with Lesson 4, Part 2, Changes in Supply. By this point, you should know that factors other than price can affect supply for a product over time, causing a shift in its supply curve, and changes in any of the determinants of supply can produce an entirely new supply curve for a product. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel to have the entire catalog of economics videos available at your fingertips. Click the subscribe button and then click the follow bell to receive notifications as to when the channel is updated. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in class, Dragons.